This is Euronews Tonight, the headlines. Life in jail for Russian soldier accused of war crimes, sentenced today by a court in Kiev. And Ukrainian fighters from the Azovstal steel plant could also face trial in the Russian-controlled eastern Donetsk region. President Zelensky addresses the World Economic Forum in Davos and calls for maximum sanctions against Russia. More cases of monkeypox reported in the EU. Now health officials are urging European countries to do more to stop the spread.
And Doctors Without Borders have removed photos on their website of a rape survivor after receiving widespread criticism online.
Good evening, welcome to the program. I'm Per Bergfors-Nyberg. Ukrainian forces captured at the Azovstal steel plant in the fallen port city of Mariupol are to face trial in the breakaway region of Donetsk. That's according to reports quoting Denis Pushilin, leader of the self-declared separatist region in eastern Ukraine. He told Russia's Interfax news agency that the Azovstal prisoners are being held in Donetsk and revealed plans for an international tribunal to decide their fate. And earlier today, a court in Kiev sentenced Russian soldier Vadim Shashamarin to life in prison for killing a Ukrainian civilian. The 21-year-old is the first person to be convicted for war crimes since the start of the invasion. Now let's head to Paris and bring in our correspondent Galina Polonskaya, who joins us live. Galina, so this morning we had the court in Kiev sentencing this Russian soldier to life in prison. And now we hear about the Azovstal fighters who could also face trial in eastern Ukraine. What are you hearing from Moscow about this?
Hello, Per. Well, President Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov today said that Russia was worried about the Russian soldier Vadim Shashamarin, who is sentenced to a life term in prison. But he said that Russia could not, quote, protect him because it did not have any institutions functioning in Ukraine, and also stressed that it did not mean that Russia would not use some other channels. And Dmitry Peskov also mentioned the Azovstal steel plant, but in which context? He said that he could not consider, that Moscow could not consider an exchange of the soldiers from the plant on Viktor Medvedchuk, who is now under arrest in Ukraine. Now, Mr. Medvedchuk is one of the wealthiest people in Ukraine, and he is considered as someone who has very, very strong ties with Vladimir Putin. And over the weekend, we have heard from one of Russia's top negotiators with Ukraine that such an exchange could be considered. Now the Kremlin says no, no way. So the question is, what is the plan? Does Moscow think of an exchange of the soldiers from the Azovstal steel plant? The Russian Foreign Ministry Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko said that Moscow is not ruling out such a possibility. But as you have mentioned, Denis Pushilin spoke about an international tribunal. So nothing is really clear, and this Thursday the Russian Supreme Court will have to decide on the request whether to label the Azov regiment a terrorist organization, and that would really complicate any possible exchange.
And Galina, a senior Russian diplomat at the UN in Geneva has resigned, saying in a statement which has been shared by the UN that he has never been so ashamed of his country as on February 24th of this year. I mean, how significant is this defection?
It is extremely significant and extraordinary. I believe it is the first time we see a Russian diplomat who resigns and who publishes a very strong statement. Boris Bondarev worked as a counselor of the Russian mission to the UN in Geneva, and in his post on LinkedIn he explains why he quits. He condemns the war. He harshly criticizes Vladimir Putin, but also the Russian Foreign Minister and the ministry. He says that it is not about diplomacy, I quote, it is all about warmongering, lies and hatred. So a very strong statement from a Russian top diplomat who resigns because of the war. And this is, we are witnessing for the first time, I believe, Per.
Galina Polonskaya, thank you so much for that report. And meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky says that between 50 to 100 Ukrainians are dying each day as Russia fights to gain control of the eastern Donbass region. Fierce fighting is raging in Severodonetsk, with Kiev accusing Moscow of using scorched earth tactic. Russian forces have launched sustained attacks in Luhansk since mid-April. Ukrainian officials say that medical services and supplies are running out. Now let's head to eastern Ukraine and speak to our correspondent Annalise Borges, who joins us live from the city of Dnipro. Annalise, fierce fighting ongoing there in eastern Ukraine where you are. What's the situation like there on the ground?
Well, Per, Ukraine said it has held off the latest Russian assault on a Ukrainian city in the east of the country, a Ukrainian city that had become one of the latest targets of Moscow's offensive in the region. Authorities say that Russian troops tried to storm the city of Severodonetsk, but were unsuccessful and retreated. They also said that they believe Moscow is moving firepower and manpower to the Luhansk province from other fronts and constantly shelling Ukrainian positions to try and storm some of the lines of defense there. The Ukrainian president, as you said, described the situation in the east as very difficult. He said it is the most difficult front for Ukrainian troops and that as many as 100 soldiers might be losing their lives there every day. That gives you, of course, an idea of just how fierce the battle for the Donbass has been, and we spoke to one soldier who knows the situation in the east very well, Andriy, who's 41 years old and was deployed to the Luhansk province at the start of this war. He described to us from a hospital bed here in Dnipro what happened on the 27th of March when his unit came under attack. He lost 80% of his battalion, but both of his sons continue to fight in the east.
We went out to the streets to check on the situation, and we saw reconnaissance drones above us. As an officer, I told everyone to go to the basement. As we went, artillery and grad rockets were fired at us. I felt my face contract. Then I woke up in hospital and I found out that I have a bullet wound to my head and shrapnel in my leg and arm, and they wanted to amputate my arm and leg because both were completely dead.
Doctors were able to save Andriy's arm and leg, but he will need at least 4 more surgeries before he can leave the hospital. They told him he will probably be here for another year. In that time, Andriy says he hopes Ukraine will win the war, but is adamant soldiers will need all the help they can get.
First of all, we need to prepare people mentally and physically. People who don't know what war is are going to fight. They have no idea of what war is all about. They saw films about it. They heard about Afghanistan and Chechnya from other guys. First of all, we need to prepare these people, and after that, we need weapons. If we have weapons, but we don't know how to use them, if a person doesn't know how to control a mortar, 1 millimeter of error is the equivalent of 10 to 100 meters during the hit. If they don't know how to shoot, what's the point in giving them weapons?
Annalise Borges live for us in Dnipro. Thank you for that report with obviously very difficult images of the realities of this war. Now, the rich and powerful have once again descended on Davos in Switzerland for the World Economic Forum, a rare spring edition of the summit. But the weather isn't the only change this year, with the war in Ukraine casting a long shadow. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed delegates on opening day, calling for maximum sanctions against Russia.
Do not wait for lethal fire. Do not wait for Russia to use special weapons, chemical, biological, or, God forbid, nuclear. Do not give the aggressor the impression that the world will not put up adequate resistance.
And our Sasha Vakulina joins us now live from Davos. Sasha, Davos is obviously gathering some of the world's most influential people. And here we have President Volodymyr Zelensky addressing delegates on opening day. What kind of message does this send?
It was indeed a very strong message that has set up the agenda here for the World Economic Forum annual meeting. There's going to be 4 days this week. He opened the Davos meetings with his keynote address, where he said he asked the community, the politicians and the business leaders here not to stop their support, to keep supporting Ukraine, and as you said, to use maximum possible sanctions. That means the full oil embargo, that means barring all the Russian banks and also Russian IT sector. All the sanctions that have not been introduced yet, he's asking the community to introduce. He said that Ukraine now is fighting, and another thing that the international community and allies can help with is weapons. And here he was very clear. He said that Ukraine is very clear in what weapons and what equipment it needs, and the partners and allies know that exactly. He said as Ukraine is now fighting almost 3 months of this war, he said Ukraine does not have much more time to wait for this help and the assistance. And then he said that who knows how much time would Europe have now with the situation when an aggressor, he said, a country feels that it can invade another country without serious consequences.
Leaders there at Davos today, how would you say that the war in Ukraine has affected their priorities for this year's summit?
It has indeed. There's lots of conversations and debates on the first day of the Davos week regarding Europe's security. And I talked today with Finland's former Prime Minister Alex Stubb when I asked him how did this message by Volodymyr Zelensky, how did it go down with the European leaders, and whether European Union and Europe in general revised its security issues.
Side of the new Iron Curtain, we have an isolated, aggressive, revisionist and totalitarian, or at least authoritarian Russia. And on the other side, we have 40, more or less, European democratic states that want to cooperate, that believe in the rule of law, human rights and fundamental rights and freedoms. And we have to try to figure out what the European security structure is in the future, because some are members in the EU, some are not. Others in NATO, some not. Some are members in both, some in neither. So we need to think about this hard and long, but I think the impact has already been colossal on European security.
That's former Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb, interviewed by you there, Sasha Vakalina. Thank you so much for that report live from Davos. Doctors Without Borders have come under fire over photos on their website that identified a survivor of rape. Now let's head to the Cube and speak to Matthew for more. Matthew?
Well, Per, this is all about 2 photos that appeared on the website of Médecins Sans Frontières, the medical NGO that's also known as MSF, or Doctors Without Borders. Now, these 2 photos were of a 16-year-old girl from the Democratic Republic of Congo, a 16-year-old girl who, just months before, had been gang-raped by armed men. These photos, which also identified her, showed this girl lying on a bench being treated by MSF at a refugee camp. But the organisation was widely criticised online, many campaigners saying that the decision to publish these photos was unethical and even racist. One of the people to speak out was human rights lawyer Sherizan Minwala. Here on Twitter, she said that victims of rape and conflict often live in insecurity, and for that reason, their safety must be the highest priority. Here arguing that by actually publishing the photos of the 16-year-old girl, MSF had put her at risk to those people who had first assaulted her. She also argued on Twitter that it was difficult to understand whether the 16-year-old girl had been able to give proper consent for her story being told and the photos being published. Well, in response to this, a spokesperson for Médecins Sans Frontières spoke to the Guardian newspaper. They said and they acknowledged that the decision to publish these photos was a misjudgment, given the age of the girl and the kind of trauma that she had experienced. And what's more, Per, Médecins Sans Frontières have said that their guidelines and policies when it comes to photographers and sexual violence and taking photos of children in conflict, they said that these policies were inadequate and in urgent need of revision.
Matthew in the Cube, thank you. Now, the number of confirmed cases of monkeypox in Europe continues to climb. The World Health Organization has recorded more than 90 cases of the infectious disease in a dozen countries. The UN agency called the outbreak a highly unusual event and said it could stem from sexual activity among men at a number of recent parties in European cities. With costs of the pandemic and fallout from the war in Ukraine mounting, the EU is looking to relax spending limits for one more year. But with further economic strife forecasted, Brussels is warning countries to be more prudent with their expenditure. Here's Christopher Pitchers.
Another year of uncertainty is causing the EU to once again question its own economic rulebook. The war in Ukraine means Brussels wants to suspend the rules that limit member state spending for another year until the end of 2023. The so-called Stability and Growth Pact, which governs public debt and deficits, has been suspended since the start of the pandemic, allowing governments more wriggle room to fight the economic fallout of COVID-19. The EU's Economy Commissioner Paolo Gentiloni tells Euronews that despite the further suspension, the situation this time round is different.
We don't want to give the message that we are in the exact same situation when we were reacting to the pandemic. At that time, reaction was inevitably a universal reaction, supporting everyone, every sector. We were in a disaster. Now we use the general escape clause also to make easier the transition from this universal support moment to a moment of more targeted and prudent support.
At the same time, the Eurozone faces a double whammy of economic shocks from the war in Ukraine to a surge in food and energy prices exacerbated by the conflict. This is alongside a supply chain shock from China's zero-COVID policy. Could this lead to a recession? Paolo Gentiloni says not yet, but the risks remain high.
If energy prices will continue to increase, if we will have, apart the prices, also problems of supply of energy, the risk to go in negative territory could materialize. It is not yet there, and the best way to avoid this is, especially for high debt countries, to use the resources, the common resources of next generation EU. This is how also high debt country can have an expansionary fiscal policies in these difficult times.
The plan to prolong the suspension of the bloc's spending rules comes as expectations that inflationary pressures will lead the European Central Bank to raise interest rates, increasing concerns about rising borrowing costs for indebted countries.
U.S. President Joe Biden has committed to defending Taiwan militarily should China ever attack it. Speaking in Tokyo, Biden compared China attacking Taiwan to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, saying the U.S. response would go beyond what it has done to support Kiev. His statement comes as Washington launches a new economic alliance in the region meant to counter China's dominance. After 2 years marred by COVID-19, the Cannes Film Festival is finally back in full swing. But the cinema industry is still feeling the effects of the pandemic. Now, that's why this year, hundreds of producers have been gathering on the sidelines of the festival to learn how to react to the new challenges. Here's Rebecca Daunt.
The Cannes Film Festival is not just about the red carpet. Behind the scenes at the back of the Palais du Festival is the film market and the international village. This year, there are more than 80 countries from all over the world spread across some 60 pavilions. The European Commission is in attendance with its Creative Europe media stand, a meeting place for all European audiovisual professionals to understand the challenges and trends of the market after 2 years marked by the pandemic.
The European Commission and its program Creative Europe Media is really happy to be back in Cannes with the whole international industry. So we are really proud to have 15 films in Cannes this year. Among 3 of them are in competition, and also really proud to have films in all the different competitions in Cannes. We are also here for the market. Business is back, and we have a really full and crowded media stand. This media stand is really aimed for the European professionals to meet and do business all together.
Among the supported films in competition is Triangle of Sadness by Ruben Eslund, who won the Palme d'Or in 2017 for The Square, a film about the uber-rich on board a luxury yacht resembling the Titanic. Today, Europe is facing many challenges, such as the ongoing digital shift, the impact of the sanitary crisis, and the complex geopolitical scene following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Regarding the industry and the films here in Cannes, the European Commission engaged together with the film festival and the market to help to have a better focus on Ukraine. So, for instance, we do have a Ukraine pavilion this year, and we wanted also to have a lot of professionals and projects to be here. So all this Ukrainian focus was aimed to enable to show the really active Ukrainian audiovisual industry.
This year's official selection includes several Ukrainian films, including Butterfly Vision in a certain regard section. But the festival's decision to also include Russian films in the competition has been met with anger. The founder of Ukrainian production company F Films has called for all Russian pictures to be banned from the event. Rebecca Daunt, Euronews.
And thank you for watching Euronews Tonight. Much more coming up. Stay with us.